The idea of changing the way Wilmington school children are bused is once again being brought up. This time, both Mayor Dennis Williams and County Executive Tom Gordon think it should be reviewed. So let's bounce around the idea on State of Play. Here this week are Stephanie Hansen from the law firm of Young, Conaway, Stargate and Taylor, and Charlie Copeland, president of Associates International, a graphics and printing company. So 40 years after busing began, are Wilmington students or schools still being discriminated against, do you think?
Well, you know, I don't know, but I know that every so often, and I've watched this over about the last really probably 20 years now or so, this whole question comes up. And it gets a little bit louder each time. I think the fact that the officials in the city of Wilmington, or that represent the city of Wilmington, are bringing it up, it at least should be looked at. I know that County Executive Gordon and the mayor have gotten some flack about why are you wading into the whole issue of education, because you guys don't have anything to do with education. But I think that's sort of a red herring, to be honest with you, because it's no more inappropriate for them to be talking about education issues than it is for members of the state legislature to talk about land use proposals, because land use is typically a county issue. It's a county issue, it's a county process, it's a county vote, and they stand up and talk about land use proposals all the time. So I think there's nothing inappropriate about Mayor Williams and Executive Gordon talking about this. I think that if anything is going to change, it has to involve the city, not just the mayor's office, but the state legislators that represent the city of Wilmington as well.
From the Republican side, the question is, are city of Wilmington residents being discriminated against in education? The answer to that question is absolutely they are. You can just look over the last 40 years at the educational achievement of city students versus county students. And if you look in the city today, out of the top four, and the average is well below the state average, but the top 4 schools in the city of Wilmington, 2 of those are charter schools. One of those is a VOTEC school, which spends significantly more money on students than anybody else, plus they can cherry pick their students. And only one of the top 4 schools is a district school. And only about 60% of its students are low income, where in the 2 charter schools that are in the top 4, their population is over 95% low income. So there are clearly schools in the city of Wilmington, they happen to be charter schools, that can educate our kids. And then there are the district schools across the city that frankly have failed. And to send the kids out into the county where they walk in the front door, and I can see this at the high school that's not a quarter mile from my house, that you walk in and they're minority kids and white kids are all going into the school building, but then they go into classrooms that are different because of the educational level, educational achievement, whatever. And so there is a dual education system. And it is a complete fallacy that you can't educate low-income kids who have broken homes, and the school systems have, and Dover, and frankly it's been more on the other side of the aisle than the Republicans. Republicans are very unified in their support of charter schools. That system continues today, and it is wrong, and it is hurting the future employment prospects of the minority community in the state of Delaware.
With all this talk, is it taking away from what we want to achieve with Race to the Top? The conversation on busing and education, and the whole the whole idea of good funded schools are the best way to go.
I don't think so. I think though, before anything is going to change, because we have to remember, this is all in place because there's a federal judge said this is the way that it needs to be. I mean, it's not like the state can just turn around and pass a law that then changes it and not be open to a serious legal challenge. What needs to happen if this is going to be turned around in some way, I think the focus that's being spent on it now needs to be put into, you need to have a good technical third-party review of have the conditions now substantively changed since they were in place when the DSEG order was first put in place in the county, or has it caused some unintended consequences that now need to be addressed? There has to be a basis, a report put out by an entity that has the standing to do that before some change is going to be able to happen and be upheld.
What happens if Colonial can't fund those after-school programs if they don't get a tax increase?
Well, the one thing I'll say about a lot of the referendums and the districts themselves is the districts have a lot of rules and regulations put on them by Dover that are not related to any consent order or anything related to busing. They're legislated by legislators down there, signed by governors who for the last 20 years have been Democrats. There are also federal rules and regulations that are laid over top, and that's certainly bipartisan. I mean, George Bush with Ted Kennedy put in No Child Left Behind, which threw a whole bunch of rules and regulations. Race to the Top and related entities through more rules and regulations. And so the districts have a little bit of a problem in that certain monies, they can only spend it on X or Y, whether or not that's a need within their district. So during the Minter administration, every school got a reading specialist. Well, what if the school didn't need a reading specialist but needed an additional science teacher? Well, they don't have money for the science teacher. They have to have a reading specialist. So you have a lot of money that's going to places that the leaders of the schools and the teachers in the schools, the parents and the kids in the schools can't say, this is what we need. And that's frankly one of the benefits of the charter schools and why I believe in the city they're able to outperform the district schools so significantly is because they have the freedom to look at their population and say, what are the needs and how do we address them? And that, to me, is the largest problem. It's not some Washingtonian or Dover-based mandate that we're going to do this. It's the local leader in the school saying, what do we need to do here? And it works when you have a good leader and they get the right teachers there. You have to have the right amount of money, but you don't need to have excess money. And you don't need to have under that amount of money.
That's a lot to think about. You agree?
I agree. But see, when tax referendums fail, tax referendums are really the way that the local district then says, okay, here's the amount of money we want to raise because we want to do X, Y, and Z. And they may be things like hire the extra science teacher that you had mentioned. But tax referendums, sometimes have a hard time passing, but that's the way that school districts generally rely on funding all the things that they think that they need above and beyond what the federal government requires.
I have a charter school that I started a few years ago, and this year we were given a 16% budget cut. We were zeroed out for low-income special needs money, and we were zeroed out for charter school startup grants. So we had a 16% budget cut. Imagine if you went to Colonial or Christiana and you said, we're going to cut your budget 16%. The noise you would hear. And yet we were able to make our budget work, push through. It has affected what we can provide without a doubt. But again, the number one rule is how do you educate your kids, and that's a good teacher in the classroom with a good leader helping that teacher develop. Those are hard things to do. They're certainly hard to do if you're facing 16% budget cuts, but they don't necessarily require every year to have 3, 4, 5% more money.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we wrap up, tell me, the mayor he just actually passed his 100-day mark. Is he making progress, do you think? Since he brought up this idea and he's talking about schools.
I think he is. I think he has a different persona, and that persona right now at least is showing some promise of being helpful. There's a couple of unique, I don't want to call them missteps yet, but there's a couple unique circumstances that I think that he needs to take a little bit closer look at. The entourage that follows him, the police. I can understand
the security detail.
The security detail.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, the security detail. I mean, I can understand. He's really big on getting out into the neighborhoods and getting into unsafe neighborhoods, actually, and then working really hard on crime. So I can understand why he does need security detail. I don't know that 5 members is maybe the appropriate number. I think that it could have actually the opposite, could have an unintended effect, and that is, if I don't live in the city of Wilmington and I understand that the mayor's got to walk around with 5 security people, maybe that makes me think maybe I don't want to be in the city of Wilmington to come downtown. You know, if I'd been thinking about going down there, it sounds like it's kind of a rough place if the mayor can't walk around without 5 people. Also, if I live in the neighborhoods where the mayor's coming around and he can't come around without an entourage, I'm worried about, well, should I be sitting on my front porch? I don't have a detail around me. What kind of a place am I living in?
Okay.
So there's a couple of ways to look at that.
Yeah, I think overall in his first 100 days, it's too soon to tell. I mean, the economy is terrible, and there's just a lot of legacy things that were not a fault of the Baker administration, but just, again, the city of Wilmington over the last 10 years has not had an easy time of it, with jobs leaving and lower producing jobs coming in behind them and things of that nature. And so he's got a tough situation ahead of him. So I think 100 days is a little too soon to tell. I do think that it sends the wrong message for the city, that the mayor requires this protection, because, again, if you're trying to get suburbanites to come to Market Street to go to the theater or go to a show or eat at a restaurant or spend money, that's a bad message to send.
Thanks, Stephanie Hansen and Charlie Copeland, for being part of State of Play.